Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Myrna Method podcast. And I'm excited about today's information. My goal is to bring you impactful nutrition information that can significantly change your life. And I think tonight's going to be a good one. I wanted to really talk about, and I know some of you guys have already asked me about this, building bone versus artery calcification. And, I know there's some controversy. Those that aren't sure about the controversy, we'll go over some of that tonight so that I can make sure that you're aware. Right now, I'm just making sure everybody's in. Perfect. So what is this controversy about building bone, or is there controversy around building bone versus artery calcification? Because we all know that calcium is an important mineral for bone, right? It's part of what makes the bone solid, strong. And to what extent is calcium supplementation harmful or helpful? So what we're going to talk about is learning outcomes. Is it calcium supplementation? Is it good for us or is it not? How do we build bone? And can we get rid of artery calcification? And those that don't know what artery calcification is, I'm going to get into that as we go through the podcast. First of all, let's talk about this controversy, the controversy with calcium in arteries regarding calcifying and blocking the arteries. So part of the plaque in arteries is actually made from fats and calcium. So how is this good or bad regarding the supplement we're taking for our bones? In other words, we're taking the supplement because we want to make our bones stronger. And how is this, if it is at all, affecting the calcification in the arteries? So let's look at some studies. This study talks about that, and obviously we know this, that calcium is a very important role in our bones. It's part of the structural part. But it also has a lot of important function in other tissues of the body as well. It helps with nerve impulse. It helps with ATP production, hormone secretion. So calcium is also an electrolyte. A lot of people don't know that. And the body's always trying to keep a balance of calcium and phosphorus. And we'll talk about that. So calcium isn't really just about building bone. It also has other properties as well. And the body has a natural way to regulate calcium. The parathyroid does that. So we have ways that the body sort of regulates the calcium. So it doesn't seem to make sense. Why would calcium supplementation be such a problem? Seems like the body ought to be able to take care of this. And what this study shows is calcium supplementation may damage the heart. Now, wait a minute. We just talked about calcium is really important. It does all these great things. It helps the body with so many, building the bones, with ATP, nerves, everything. I mean, calcium is an electrolyte. We have to have it in our system. The body wants it in our system at all times. Why is it now we're seeing studies showing that calcium supplement may actually damage the heart? What we find in this study, and the key point here, is that calcium from food actually has some protection involved, but calcium associated with supplementation has risks. So in this study, it talks about how, let me see if I can bring my pen out here so I can start drawing and showing you where it's. So in this study, it talks about, from Johns Hopkins, that taking calcium in the form of supplementation may raise the risk of plaque buildup in arteries. But a diet that has the calcium in it does not. It actually is protective. So they're actually distinguishing, there's a difference between supplementation versus the calcium that we're getting from food. So that they're saying that they're really wanting us to be aware of some of the harmful effects of this supplementation. And the researchers were motivated to look at the effects of calcium on the heart and vascular system, because studies already showed that ingested calcium supplements, particularly in older people, don't make it to the skeletal or get completely excreted in the urine. So they accumulate in the soft tissue. Scientists also know that it can be related to age. So basically what we want you to know from this, the big takeaway, is that calcium, because you know what, calcium is important for building bone. And I don't want people to think, oh my gosh, I gotta not do any calcium at all, because calcium is important, but calcium is not the only mineral involved in bone. In fact, studies support that just taking calcium alone did not reduce risk for fractures. Okay, so that calcium alone is not really the only thing that's required to build bone. But what I want you to get from this study is there's actually some risks associated with supplementing with calcium. And by the way, calcium is in a lot of foods. Calcium is actually supplemented in a lot of foods, and we'll talk about that too as well. This study, let me see if I can shrink it down a little bit, the risk of high dietary calcium for artery calcification in older adults. And this is where they're finding a lot of the research. Concern has recently arisen about the potential adverse effects of excess calcium intake from supplements on artery calcification. So I have seen that sometimes people are taking a lot of calcium because they found out they had osteopenia, they had osteoporosis, their bones were actually thinning, and they were told to take calcium supplementation. And this shows that high calcium intake have little or no beneficial impact on bone mineral density. And fracture rates, the current recommendation of calcium for adults may be set too high. And the problem here, and this is really where I want you guys to see this, is that the kidneys may not be able to eliminate the excess calcium in the diet. And that's the problem. Also, people with kidney disease, we have to be really careful with this, because they really have a problem getting rid of a lot of minerals from the body, and this would be one as well. So what can happen is this overload doesn't really make it to the bones here, like they're saying, and in fact can show up in soft tissue, and that is what's leading to this research on calcification. So we look at another journal, Journal of American Heart Association. We usually trust everything they say, right? So here they talk about recent random data shows that calcium supplementation may be associated with increased risk of cardiovascular events. That's like heart attacks. And they did a cohort study. That means they took a study of several groups of people, and they assessed the association between calcium intake from both foods and supplements, and they did see that the supplements did cause atherosclerosis, which is the plaque in the arteries. And by the way, this shows up in a calcium score. A lot of people are getting those calcium scores, and the calcium scores, they give you a range, and it tells you how much buildup you have that's been calcified. So let's talk about how this all happens. So I'm going to kind of draw some pictures here. The main cause of calcium calcification in arteries how does this all happen? So let's look at an artery. You'll have to forgive my artistic abilities here, but we'll get the point, and that's really why we're here. So here's the artery wall. And what happens in the artery wall is we have a lot of buildup. We can have bacteria in the wall. We have free radicals in the wall. And one of the biggest culprits, and you guys have heard me talk about it in previous podcasts, are free radicals. So I'm going to bring them up again because it's always good repeating what you probably already know, but just getting it solid in the brain. So free radicals, for those that are new to this term, are the compounds that the body releases because we breathe. So we have this little metabolism that's running at about 97 degrees, and this metabolism releases free radicals, just like fire releases smoke. So free radicals are the end product of us just being human, just because we breathe and we're a little furnace, just like fire is a heated furnace, it releases smoke. So does our metabolism. Our metabolism releases these free radicals, and these particles oxidize tissue. And it's just a chemical thing that they do, more or less. And free radicals go around the body, and their most favorite thing to oxidize are fats, LDL fats. And we know these LDL fats because when we go get our cholesterol, these are considered the bad guys, right? And these LDL fats are circulating in the artery wall. Also, there's certain bacteria that circulate in there. We talked about that as well. But for tonight, let's just talk about how these LDLs get oxidized by these free radicals. So the free radicals go in and they actually begin to oxidize these LDLs. And what that does is that creates an inflammatory response. So then what happens is the body triggers an inflammatory response and says, hey, something over here is being damaged. And that causes an inflammatory response that then recruits an immune cell called a macrophage. And this macrophage immune cell goes to the site and literally lays down a foam cell. And this foam cell is what turns into plaque. So this immune system of ours is actually trying to put out the fire. It's trying to get rid of the oxidation from the free radicals, and it's laying down this plaque that then calcifies. So it's actually the plaque that is in the artery that comes from the immune response that becomes hardened, because as this becomes thicker, the wall then expands out. So you can imagine you get a narrowing of the artery. And this over time is what calcifies. Now, once it's calcified, it's hard as a rock. And that saves you really, to some extent, from getting a heart attack, because little pieces of this are not going to break off. And you know, from previous podcasts, I explained how bacteria can get in there from the gut. Here we go again, bringing in the gut, and can actually weaken this artery wall. And as you're building more inflammation in the artery wall, you're going to have what's called hard plaque, which is the calcified plaque, or you're going to have the soft plaque that's going to just keep laying on top of this. So the body will just keep laying down this plaque and actually narrowing that artery wall, right? So that artery wall gets narrow because this is where the blood flows. So understanding that a calcification, what happens when the body gets to a situation that you've had this calcification, is because we've had this inflammation from free radicals. These are our fats that are not so good fats that accumulate. The free radicals begin to oxidize them, and they cause immune cells to put down a foam cell, which then hardens and becomes hard plaque, which is what hardens it, is the calcification. It's actually the calcium. Just like it hardens bones, it hardens the plaque, because the body's actually trying to protect you, so pieces of that don't get released and clog up the artery. So actually, calcification is a way our body protects us. So the question is, can we reverse this calcification? Well, let's talk about this. I want to kind of go back over this. Calcium is important for body function. So the body balances calcium in the blood, and we're going to talk about this. And the body also steals calcium from the bones when we have an imbalance. So there is a chemical imbalance that the body will begin to steal calcium from the bones and put it into the blood. So we do have a situation where the body will not excrete excess calcium, because if we're taking all these supplements, maybe the kidney can't get rid of all the calcium. It accumulates in the blood. And this calcium accumulation in the blood, studies are now saying, yes, we can get it from the LDL being oxidized, but studies are now saying this excess calcium supplements that are building up in the blood can actually cause a type of calcification in the arteries, not just from what we're used to seeing, which is the plaque being laid down from this free radical oxidation on our fats, but actually possibly excess calcium that doesn't get excreted can also get up in the wall and contribute to this calcification. So this talks about calcium, because I do want to tell everybody it's super important in the body. We do want to get calcium in the body. And I want to talk about what happens maybe when we don't get enough calcium, because excess calcium, we're finding out, not so good. But when we don't get enough calcium, although we do have feedback loops, the parathyroid helps us do that. But even then, we can have a situation in the body where we can get an imbalance. So let's talk about that. So we talked about how the body has calcium as an electrolyte and also phosphorus. These two electrolytes try to be balanced in the blood. So the body tries to keep an equal amount of calcium to equal amount of phosphorus. Now, phosphorus is in many foods, and we'll talk about that. When we have a situation in our diet where we have more phosphorus than we have more calcium, and this can happen from eating a lot of phosphorus foods. Now, phosphorus is an important mineral. All our cells in our body use phosphorus to create the membrane of cells. So it's an important mineral, just like everything in the body has its purpose. Everything in the body is important. But what I hope you understand from everything that I bring you is the body is on a system of balance. And that goes when I talk about obesity, because the root cause of obesity is, again, from a dietary imbalance. Just like everything, the root cause of everything is because we don't really understand how to keep the body balanced. Nutrition is literally one of the best ways we can do that, which is why we're here tonight, because we're talking right now about the calcium and phosphorus balance. And when phosphorus is greater than calcium in the blood, the body begins to pull calcium from the bones and put it into the blood. So the body, actually, if you're low in calcium and you have high phosphorus, the body will actually begin to do a bone steal to try to get it equal in the blood, because the body wants the electrolytes in the blood to have an equal amount of calcium and phosphorus, because there are two electrolytes, and that's how electrolytes work. They like to keep balance in the blood. So the body says, no problem, we'll pull it from the bone. And where this is really interesting is when we start looking at food and we look at calcium values versus phosphorus values. So I don't want to confuse people. I do want to come back to the calcium calcification in the arteries. I want to drive the point home that it's about balance. Excess calcium through supplementation is not balance, okay? Not having enough calcium is not balance. Your diet and your health all have to deal with knowing how to balance everything. So I'm giving you an example in food, calcium values. How much calcium do we need in a day? About 1,200 milligrams a day. So let me write that down because I think that's important. 1,200 milligrams a day of calcium. So these are in milligrams. So if you look at 1 cup of yogurt, you're 260. 1 cup of milk, 300. 1 cup of cooked spinach, 250. And a cup of cooked kale. So right there, you're almost at your day's worth. We look at sardines at 325. Tofu, almond milk. Almond milk is fortified. They fortify it with about 350 to 400 milligrams of calcium. Meat only has 20. Soda has 0. White rice has 15. So I want you to see that there's a lot of foods that have 0 calcium. Now let's go over to phosphorus. 1 cup of yogurt has 240. Wait a minute. It had a calcium value of 260 and it had a phosphorus value of 240. So you're not really helping out you're pretty much keeping the balance pretty neutral here, aren't you? So it's not like taking in calcium, from yogurt or milk. If you're also taking a bunch of phosphorus from other foods, you could actually be taking in calcium from your diet and you may not be getting it in your bones. And this is like an aha moment as a dietitian for me, because it's like, wow, how many people have osteopenia and osteoporosis? And they tell me all the time, I don't get it because I'm certainly eating plenty of calcium. And you know what I'm finding as a dietitian? There's truth in that. Okay. But what they may not realize is they're not getting dietary balance. Maybe their diet is really high in phosphorus, and so what? They're getting some calcium in their diet. They also have too high of phosphorus, because what we're going to look at is a lot of foods that have phosphorus, okay, are brown rice, foods that we may not think about, that have high phosphorus and have very little calcium. So we can have a diet that's going to be a meat. Meat has 200 milligrams of phosphorus and only 20 calcium. So think about that. Let's say you do a diet of brown rice, because brown rice is healthy, and you do some sodas and you eat some chicken and some meat, and you maybe do some tofu because you think that's healthy, but it still has a lot of phosphorus. So you're raising up this guy here, and you're really not paying attention here. You get osteopenia, and your doctor says, hey, yeah, let's go take 2,000 milligrams of calcium on top of the fact you're already stealing it from the bones. Are we really helping our bones? Absolutely not. Because you really have to understand the science to really understand this, right? It's not just, I always laugh when people will just do a blanket, well, let's just take calcium or let's do this. It's really about understanding nutrition from a balanced perspective. And calcium is needed, guys. You need calcium, absolutely. And you need phosphorus. But it's about balance. It's about knowing how to eat. This is huge, knowing how to eat. And that's why I invite you to my Tuesday night, because that teaches you how to eat. This is just information to back it. So we can see now why it could definitely happen that people could be eating a diet that has some calcium in it, and they think they're doing okay, but they're really loading up on a lot of meat. They're doing the brown rice, so they did their servings of calcium but this also has phosphorus as well. And we're going to get an imbalance. We're going to see a calcium steal, especially if they don't get enough calcium in their diet and they have way more phosphorus. So they don't take foods in with enough calcium and they're getting an overload of phosphorus. We're going to have the calcium steal. Okay, and then now you get osteopenia and you're taking more supplements of calcium. And now we're seeing that it could lead to problems with artery calcification. So what medications block calcium? These are some medications that block calcium. So let's say you're eating a lot of phosphorus because you're pretty sure you're eating a healthy diet because you do 5 ounces of chicken, 2 cups of brown rice. Maybe you do a soda. My God, a soda isn't so bad. Maybe you're doing your vegetables, all these. Okay. We'd have to look at the type of vegetables, but are they really helping your calcium? And then let's say you're taking some medications. These will actually lower your calcium. High sodium diet also blocks calcium. High processed foods because they don't have a lot of calcium. And high processed foods, wait for it, here it comes. They're using phosphorus as an additive for flavoring, preservative. So even processed foods in a package are going to have way more phosphorus. So high processed foods, high sodium diet. And I'm eating a healthy diet of brown rice and chicken and bread because bread has way more phosphorus than it does calcium. And you think you're eating pretty good, and you could be creating an imbalance. So let's look at some calcium sources. So I have some here. You look at plain yogurt. This is 8 ounces. This is from the government website. I'm not sure how accurate a lot of these are, but you can see that you can get a pretty good amount of calcium if you're doing some yogurt. Maybe you're doing some tofu. Maybe you do a half a cup of tofu is 434 milligrams of calcium. That's a lot. Now, these also have phosphorus, but as far as getting the amount of calcium, you're doing pretty good here. It doesn't seem like it takes that much. And some of these juices are actually fortified. I know orange juice, they fortify that with calcium now. So I think you have to look at when you're taking excess calcium, you got to also look at you're probably getting it fortified in some of your foods as well, like almond milk and grapefruit juice and orange juice. So you could be drinking a glass of orange juice, a glass of almond milk, and maybe you're doing a serving of yogurt, and you're well on your way. You have more than you need for the day, right? So why is it when some people are doing this, why are they still getting osteopenia? Because it could be that their diet isn't balanced. And it also can be that they're not getting all the other ingredients that are super important. So supplementation regarding building bones, some of it may be necessary. So calcium needs to be at 1,200 milligrams a day. Magnesium, calcium, and vitamin D are big bone builders. They got to all be present, guys. And if you're depleted in one of these, you're probably not going to be building the bone. Also, vitamin K is huge. And we'll talk about the vitamin K because this is one of the things in studies we have shown actually reverses calcification in the arteries. So I first want to really bring the point home that, calcium is important. We got to get the right amount. But if you're going to build bone, it's not calcium alone. It's bringing in the magnesium, the vitamin D, the vitamin K, boron, and phosphorus. These here, we're going to get plenty in food. And then you got to do exercise, weight bearing exercise. So we get a lot of this already in food. Some of these others, maybe the magnesium is going to be in leafy greens. So if you're eating a pretty good plant-based diet, you're going to get the magnesium, and believe it or not, you're probably going to get the calcium. So if I go back, let me go back to this here with the calcium. I really want to take the point home that a cup of cooked collards have 268 milligrams of calcium and no phosphorus, very little phosphorus. I look at the cooked kale, it's 177 milligrams of calcium and very little phosphorus. I looked at cooked spinach and very little phosphorus. Sure, I can find dairy products higher than these, but I'm also going to get the phosphorus with it. So really doing a diet of some of these greens can really up the calcium and drop down the phosphorus. Pretty interesting. So I just wanted to bring that home so that we could see that, we tend to think of dairy is like the only way we get our calcium, right? Yeah, dairy's it. But this is showing like tofu had plenty of calcium, and look at some of the cooked greens do as well. But one of the great things about the cooked greens, which we're going to talk about, here's some other sources too. We have mustard greens, a cup of mustard greens are 284. We have bok choy, 185. So you can see that we've got beet greens at the bottom, 164. So we can see that there's a lot more calcium in foods than maybe what we thought, right? So what's interesting about this is that vitamin K and calcium are in a lot of common foods, and that's going to be the leafy greens. And what I want to talk about here, and this was something I pulled together, was the calcification and the aortic stenosis. This is what they found here. This is a form of calcification similar to the soft tissue artery. And the studies on this show that the cause of this, what they think a contributing factor, not cause, but contributing factor regarding lifestyle, is a high consumption of animal proteins, a high BMI, particularly when it comes to body fat, and a low consumption of plants. And I think this is going to really drive the point home, because vitamin K, calcium, some of these are really high in plants. So although some of these plants have high calcium, they have high vitamin K. And it's going to be the K that studies are going to show can actually reverse the calcification. This just shows here that when they did studies, they showed that there's a high association of the stenosis. And this is just looking at association. And they looked at when people consumed a high amount of red meat, there was a high association of this calcification, this stenosis. And also when they had low amounts of plants, okay, plant foods in general. So we'll talk about which plants are going to be the most beneficial. So what this showed, because I tried to pull everything up, they said despite hopes, vitamin K supplements fail to slow calcium buildup in the actual heart valve. And the thing with the heart valve is that, man, when you start getting stenosis there, you don't really have time to reverse you pretty much are going in for surgery. It's a replacement, because once those valves go, not a good thing. A little different with the arteries. They have more time, the buildup's longer. You're still going to have an issue, but I just wanted to show that K2 in some of the studies, and maybe it was because of time is a factor when you start getting the heart valve, they want to do something about it very quickly. K2 may help reverse calcium buildup in the arteries, but some of the studies show that it wasn't as successful in the aortic stenosis, okay? So let's go and look at some more studies. Shrink my screen down. Hold on a minute. Okay. So we're going to look now at, can vitamin K reverse calcification in arteries and the studies on that. And then I'm going to show you how it does it. I'm going to show you the science behind it. So adequate intake of vitamin K has been shown to lower the risk of vascular damage because it activates a protein that we will talk about called the matrix GL protein. MGP is what they call it right here, which inhibits the calcium from depositing in the vessel walls. So vitamin K actually helps activate a protein called MGP that inhibits the calcium deposit in the vessel walls. So what they show here in this study is vitamin K deficiency results in an inadequate activation of this protein, which greatly impairs the process of calcium removal, and it increases the risk of blood vessels. The calcification of blood vessels. So when that MGP is low, then you have an increase of calcification. When MGP is high, it actually can remove the calcification from the arteries. And where does this come from? Vitamin K is what activates that. So the key is, how do we know what to eat to get that? So let's read on. It says here that it showed that the study revealed that high dietary intake of K2, at least 32 micrograms a day, and we'll come back to that. And they didn't do any K1. So I'll talk about the difference of K2 and 1. We'll come back to this because it's going to be significant to understand what type of K we need and where do we get this. Okay, I'm having some technical issues. Let me see. I'm trying to shrink the screen so you guys can see. There we go. So let's go to the next slide. So the two types of vitamins, or two types of vitamin K, are K1 and K2. And the difference is that K1 is what we are eating when we eat our leafy greens. And the highest source of vitamin K from food is going to come from green plants, broccolis, kales, cauliflower, collards. And by the way, those also have a higher level of calcium, which is interesting because it's almost like plants knew, I'm going to bring you the calcium and then I'm going to bring you the K1 or 2 to clean this stuff up. It actually, K1, it activates clotting. It helps build bones, really important. And it's converted to K2 in the gut. Here we go again. But K2 is made from a fermentation process. Where did we hear about fermentation? Oh, yeah, that's right. When we talked about bacteria in the gut and how important that was for health, right? Well, here you go. Bacteria in the gut is super important for health because it's the bacteria in the gut that actually is helping create the very essence that is needed to remove the calcification from those vessels. It's actually the K2. You're eating the greens, it's converting to K2, and this is what activates the MGP protein. This is the one that does it. It inhibits the calcification in soft tissue, not only in vascular, but also in joints. It doesn't allow the calcification to build up. That is amazing. So let's look deeper into this. How much do we need? Well, the recommended daily allowance, according to the American Dietetic Association, our good old government says 120 micrograms a day. And this will convert down to what we saw in the studies of about 32 micrograms. So when we saw the studies, and we'll go back to them, they found when they had 32 micrograms, and they were doing supplementation. But listen, guys, beware, because you're taking a supplement doesn't mean there's any doggone thing in it. Let me tell you what. I get testing back from patients, and they're like, I don't understand why my vitamin D is low. I don't understand why my magnesium is low. I'm taking all these supplements. I'm like, well, guess what? It isn't regulated, and there's no way we know how much is really in it. Not so much with food. We have a more reliable source of food. So what we're saying is 120 micrograms, can it be converted down to 32? So a lot of studies say, well, you know, it's a 10 to 20 conversion rate. So it may be a little less. It may be that the RDA means that it's actually going to convert down to maybe a little less than that. Maybe it's 20 micrograms. So maybe we have to eat a little more. Because the conversion rate that I'm reading is going to be anywhere from maybe 10 to 20%, that the K1s get turned into MK7s, which are the main ones in the K2s. These are coming from the K2s. So let's go look at vitamin sources of K. So when we look at vitamin sources of K, let me shrink my screen. So I'm opening up my screen to show you guys. So natto is a fermented source. And it's interesting because when you have sauerkraut or anything fermented, it's going to have much higher vitamin K, because vitamin K is made through a fermentation process. Your gut is the best fermentation machine going on the planet, because your gut ferments to make all these really healthy bacteria that I keep talking about. And when you have IBS and you have gut issues, you're not fermenting well, which is why in the MERNA method, when I teach you how to eat, what is one of the main things that I talk about, the corner balance that I say can reverse obesity, one of the 4 is bacteria in the gut. I talk about it till the cows come home. Literally telling you, bacteria in the gut is tied to everything. And it's certainly tied to this. Because if you have a gut that's totally messed up, if we talked about this last night, if you're just not pooping, I hate to put it that way, but in simple language, if you're just not cleaning the gut and you're not providing what the gut needs to be healthy, do you really think you're going to be making a lot of this vitamin K? News alert, don't think so. So osteopenia and osteoporosis sort of takes a whole new light in this country, doesn't it? Because we have gut issues in this country. And by the way, with obesity, there's a huge imbalance of gut bacteria, the bad guys. So let's just look at the amount of micrograms in food. Now, remember, they're saying 120 micrograms, and we need 32 micrograms, which even if it's 10% or 20%, if you're looking at 3 ounces of natto, which is really soybeans that have, it's tofu that's been fermented, that's 850 micrograms. Look at collards, a half a cup. My God, seriously? You mean to tell me you can't do a half a cup of boiled collard greens? That's 530. Even if I did a 10% conversion, it's going to be 53 micrograms of MK7, much higher than the study said reversed the artery calcification. And the turnip greens, 426, half a cup, people. Half a cup's not a lot. Take your hand and just cup it like this, just a small little cup. That is what half a cup is. Spinach. 1 raw cup of spinach, 145. Kale, raw, 113. Broccoli, 110. This literally, half a cup of broccoli, half a cup of broccoli while you're taking the supplement. But really, if you want to get to the MK7, maybe you need a cup of broccoli. You probably need 3 cups of broccoli, and that'll do it. So I wanted to show this to you because look at what's off the planet. And by the way, do I need to go back to the calcium? Because a lot of these really high in calcium. So I just think it's interesting how it all kind of pans out when you look at the balance. And if I look at over here at vitamin K and some of these other food groups, not so good. So we're not going to see vitamin K in eggs or meat or vegetables. In fact, they're going to be lower in some of these other fruits, I should say. It's the green that we're looking at. Iceberg lettuce didn't really make the hit, but surprise, surprise, that's not real green. Blueberries are good for you, but not when it comes to vitamin K. They don't give you much. But you can see that these are, like, people consider these healthy foods. But imagine somebody now with heart disease that is eating a lot of these foods, and they have osteopenia, and they think they're doing okay because they're doing 2 servings of yogurt, which, by the way, doesn't have any vitamin K, very little. So what's going on? Well, I shouldn't say that. Yogurt is fermented. So actually, yogurt will have a little more vitamin K because of the fermentation than you'll get in milk. So this is really should be eye-opening to a lot of people. Because really what we're saying is food can reverse calcification in the arteries, and food can cause calcification in the arteries. And everybody thinks they eat healthy. That's the one that blows my mind. I always tell people come and see me, oh yeah, well, I eat a healthy diet. And I'm like, okay. And you have diabetes and you have osteopenia. Okay. So how important is diet? Pretty important. So the big thing to understand, and I pull out the 32 micrograms because I'm really trying to drive a point home here. Like we're talking 2 cups of broccoli, we got it done. Or maybe 3 cups of broccoli and half a cup of spinach, you're done. It's made in the gut through fermentation, and that's the other thing I want to bring home. The very thing that cleans the arteries depends on eating green vegetables and having a healthy gut, bottom line. So if you have calcification, if you have a calcium score that's really high, you betcha you want to know how to eat. And taking massive doses of calcium, I wouldn't recommend it. It's certainly not going to mean that you're going to have less osteopenia because you have to take everything into consideration. So this talks about the proper calcium use in K2 as a promoter in bone and cardiovascular health. And really what this again is talking about, which is the same study, and I'll blow it up because the point I'm really bringing home here is they're saying at least 32 micrograms of the K2, which is made from the K1. Or you can eat a fermented product, which will have some of it. But bottom line, or you can take a supplement. But, you take a supplement. Do you really know what's in the supplement? So I like this study because it does talk about how high calcium consumption, strengthens the skeleton. And I don't like the word high, but let's just say adequate. But it can also increase heart disease risk because of artery calcification, excess that can't be eliminated from the body. So we have to understand that it's all about balancing the diet. Knowing how to eat, guys, is the key. And also the gut. dietary vitamin K actually helps remodel the gut. It actually works biodirectionally because the gut actually depends on vitamin K to keep that bacteria community healthy. So it's important to understand that the gut is really, really important as far as heart disease. And we're learning now with vitamin K. So somebody could say, well, you know, I'm on statins, and shouldn't that help? Well, you know, statins really are lifesavers in the sense that they go and block the cholesterol, so at least you're not on fire. But even with statins, I see blockage, you're just putting a Band-Aid on it. We need to really just take heart disease and just get rid of it. So heart disease and diabetes, they're dietary diseases, type 2 diabetes. They're dietary diseases, guys. They can be reversed. And it's not based on drugs alone, because the Cleveland Clinic says, hey, if y'all are just depending on drugs, it'll work for a while. But even the Cleveland Clinic states nothing outdoes lifestyle. Of course, nobody knows what that means, right? So hopefully that's why you come visit me, because I'm going to try to give you bits and pieces exactly what that means. And I think also, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about this, although it's not 100% in the podcast tonight, the focus, but I have to go back to obesity, because you guys hear me say over and over again, what is my life mission? My life mission is to teach you how to eat to get rid of obesity, because if we get rid of obesity, we get rid of a lot of other stuff. It's gone. Obesity is a cornerstone. And the gut is a cornerstone also. And when you are obese, your bacteria in your gut change. There's two kind of species, Firmicutes and Bacteroides. Those that do my podcast have heard this before. And when people are overweight, they have a larger percentage of one versus the other. And that is because they're eating foods that contribute to this. When this happens, you also don't have a healthy gut, period. Because the species of bacteria in the gut are altered. So they talk about how that when people are obese, they have a higher species of Firmicutes versus Bacteroides. And when they look at bacteria in the mouth, and they look at bacteria that causes the problems in the artery walls, like the TMAO, these are all from that Firmicutes. These are all from that gram-negative species. And it just so happens to be the more prevalent with obesity. We don't know why. We really aren't sure why, because we find that it's pretty unanimous. When people have obesity, they tend to have an alteration in their gut bacteria. So that's taking it back to, back home there. So let's talk about the summary. I notice it's getting close to the hour. I try to keep these so that you guys don't have to be with me all night, although I would love it, but I think some of you guys get really tired of that. Anyways, the summary basically is you want to eat 2 cups of greens. I mean, if you didn't get that out of tonight, right? You want to consume calcium in food. And bone health, vitamin D is probably important, because this is going to be really tough to get in food. Okay, so this is one of the things I always say, this is probably going to be a supplement here. I've got to get my pen to work, okay? And then magnesium is one of those minerals, especially as you age. I'm always recommending it to patients. Restless leg syndrome has contributed to that. Magnesium plays so many roles. It is an electrolyte, and we don't do as well at absorbing it as we age. And quite honestly, exercise and a lot of things can deplete it. So getting a little bumper of magnesium is good. Too much, be careful, because it can loosen the stools. So this seems to be, from all the studies, a good amount. Plus, you're going to need that magnesium to build the bone. So magnesium works with the calcium, it works with the vitamin D, also the vitamin K, right? And that helps with bone as well. So these are all the bone builders: vitamin K, calcium, vitamin D, and magnesium. That's how you build a bone. There's boron and phosphorus as well, but they're small little cofactors, and we know we're going to get plenty of those. And there's no way you're deficient in those. So these are the bone builders. And that is the story on calcification. And if you have any questions, I'm going to leave it open. So building bone versus artery calcification. Hopefully tonight you got a really good feel for where you stand personally in this process, and maybe how you can make some adjustments to your diet, or maybe even your supplementation, to have better calcification reversal and calcium fortification for bone growth. So I'm going to leave it open. If anybody has questions, you can go to the chat, or you can just unmute your mic. Pretty informal. However, I'll leave it open.
Myrna, this was really interesting. I didn't realize how ineffective calcium supplements can be, and how just by adding in greens, we can really resolve this calcium issue. I do have a question. You were talking about at the end about the magnesium. How do we get in adequate levels of magnesium?
So, isn't it amazing? It is in some of our leafy greens. Magnesium's also in a lot of nuts and seeds, and I'm not a real proponent of a lot of those foods, but magnesium's in beans. It's all the things I talk about that build the gut, right? It's in your plants, the healthiest, although you will find it in some of your fattier things like your nuts and seeds. And I try to minimize too many fats in the diet, because I'm trying to keep people's fats, 30% of their diet fat. And fat really, really accumulates quickly in a diet. I mean, you go to a restaurant, you can easily get your day's worth of fat just in one meal, and it's not always the best fat, and that fat accumulates. But magnesium can be found in some fatty foods. So, answer to your question, I think magnesium supplement, I do recommend it, magnesium citrate, because I have seen with age, people typically don't eat enough food to get it, and it does get depleted. And it's just one of those minerals. It's like, it helps with the arteries, it helps with bone, and and if you're taking calcium, even through food, you may not be matching it with enough magnesium. And we can actually do a podcast on magnesium, and I can go through all the different properties of it and show you all the different food values if you guys would like that. But it is a pretty amazing mineral. Does that help, Karen?
Yeah, and also, how do we ensure, so you mentioned that a lot of supplements aren't well regulated. How do we know which ones are good and which ones have success with being bioavailable?
It's hard. I'm gonna just say probably going with some of the bigger brands, because I think they have more to lose if they don't get it right. Like the Walgreens special, who knows where they're getting theirs made from. I wouldn't trust that. I know they're cheaper. I'd probably go with a brand that is very well known in health store, because they certainly don't want somebody testing their product and finding out that they don't really have in it what they say, right? So like the Now brand, or some of these brands that are really, $1 million companies, I would probably feel safer with them, because they have more to risk and they have their sources that are made. But it's really tough because it isn't regulated. And really, it should be regulated because people, for God's sakes, are the more we're finding out about supplements and some of the benefits we can get. I mean, it would be nice if they were regulated like we regulate our pharmaceuticals, because it would be good to know that we're getting the benefit when we take something that hopefully we're really getting what we think we are. But I guess the answer to your question, there's really there's no standard, there's no requirement.
Okay. And also, you mentioned that we need about 1,200 milligrams of calcium. How much phosphorus do we need in a day?
So the recommended daily allowance is like 700 milligrams, but most people get anywhere from 3 to 4,000, which is fine because that's the average amount people get, about 3,000 a day. You don't really need to worry about limiting. Don't limit phosphorus. It's important mineral. More importantly, just balance it with the right calcium and you'll be fine. It's when people are calcium deficient, okay, and then they're really eating a lot of phosphorus. That's when they're really going to see the bone stale. Or maybe they are taking in calcium, but they're not doing the magnesium or any other things. So their body's sort of crippling along. So, yeah, so I don't really, I have people just try to get that magnesium, that vitamin K. You'll get plenty of phosphorus in your food. You don't really need to worry about it. It's in everything, by the way. Everything has it. Any other questions?
I mean,
Okay.
I found it interesting. I mean, I'm over here like taking notes and very interesting to run through some things again for sure.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna try to get some of these up. Samantha's gonna help put it on the YouTube channel because I really want everybody to know this, so not just you guys, but I think this is information everybody should know. And also, I'm awesome with feedback. So if anybody wants to give me feedback on, even how I present it, if you think I should do it a better way to improve, let me know because my heart is in it. Nutrition is amazing. I think that we just need to know more about it because my God, we're taking all these medications, and I think that if we can really, really understand, I mean, here's a perfect example, just this little thing tonight, what a difference this can make in cardiovascular disease and in osteopenia, right? So I think by understanding more about nutrition and how the balance works can really, I think, be impactful in most of our lives. And there's
Myrna,
always,
this,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. This
Go ahead.
presentation was really, really good tonight. And I'm texting people while I'm listening to it and I'm taking notes and everybody is so interested and curious and excited to learn more about it. And so that was the good thing. The tough thing is it's just so much information.
No.
And it's so amazing how you think you're eating good foods and you're doing things right. But like you said, it's all about balance. So you really do have to keep track of, what your intake is to make sure that, you're not hurting yourself or
Yeah,
damaging things when you think you're doing right.
it is a lot of info. So what I want to try to do is I want to bring the science to the table always. I want to bring the biochemistry. So I want to explain to people how things work. And then I want to, at the end of all my podcasts, give how you fix it. And that's how you fix it right here, guys. If you had to say, okay, you just did this presentation, we learned all this stuff, how do you fix this thing? This is it. This is how you fix it. Literally, 2 cups of greens, consume calcium in foods, do vitamin D, and take magnesium. Right there is pretty much fixes a lot of stuff. I mean, now that I told you about the artery calcification, yeah, I mean, I would be packing in the greens for sure. But if you did, think about it, if you did 2 cups of collards, or even if you did a cup of collards, that's like a major amount of vitamin K. I mean, if we go back to, let's see if I can find my vitamin K here. Yeah. So if we look here, I mean, that's insanity, right? So if we look at a cup of the collards, that's a half a cup. A cup of collards is 1,000 micrograms, guys, of vitamin K, and 1,000 micrograms. And even if it was only a 10% conversion, although some studies say that it's could be as much as a 20% conversion once it gets in the gut and it ferments, that's still going to be 3 times what the study says to reverse calcification, the calcification, because they're saying 32 micrograms, and that's doing studies of people, random controlled trials. We got all these people, we got them on this stuff, we're measuring their blood. Yeah, that's when they're doing the calcium scores and seeing, wow, that only took 32 micrograms. But if you look at what that requires from a food perspective, my God, seriously, 2 cups of greens. If you did 2 cups of greens, you'd be in insanity, right? What if you did 2 cups of turnip greens? You'd be over 5 times what that study said you needed in vitamin K. And you're not taking a supplement. You're not taking a supplement. Why are you taking a supplement? People say, well, I'm taking vitamin K. And I'm like, well, okay, that's fine. I mean, okay, whatever. But, why don't you do it through food? It's just, how do you know it's got what it says in it? And food's also got other stuff in it. I haven't even talked about yet these greens and the nitric oxide that come from them. I haven't even gone into that with you guys. So it's like, and it's massive information. But if you just take a little bit at a time, just think how this will empower you. Just think how it'll empower you. Because, I'm going to reverse obesity for all the people that contact me in my lifetime. You know that. That's my mission, those that know me. Because the root cause of obesity is because we just don't know how to eat. And want to know something? The root cause of cardiovascular disease is because you just don't know how to eat. And the root cause of type 2 diabetes is because you just don't know how to eat. You get it, guys? We don't know how to eat. And that's what I'm here to teach you guys, how to eat. So on Tuesdays, that's all I talk about, how to reverse obesity, not talking about this stuff. And then every Wednesday, I'm going to teach a little bit on how to eat, a little bit of a nugget that I think will make a huge impact in your life. And here's the summary. This is all you got to do. That's it. Done.
Do you recommend that we eat cooked greens so we can fit a larger amount for the volume?
So there's a lot of things about cooked greens versus raw. So some of the raw greens have some things in them that cooks don't, and sometimes cooking's better. But the biggest thing about cooking some of the greens, especially the spinach family, there's oxalates in these vegetables, and they're put there because plants don't want bugs to eat them. So when bugs eat them, these oxalates that are in the leaves give the bug a big stomach ache, and the bug dies or doesn't do well or whatever, doesn't want to eat it anymore or whatever. I don't know if it actually kills the bug, but it doesn't want to eat the green. So a lot of times these oxalates can contribute to kidney stones. Some people can have food sensitivities. So as soon as you cook the green, you kill like 90% of those oxalates. So for some people, I recommend spinach, which is really high in oxalates, especially if they tend to, get kidney stones or have a predisposition for them. Then I'm going to say, yeah, definitely cook those greens. Vitamin K does not get killed in the heat process. Yay for that, right? So that's good. Now there's some enzymes that are involved in the raw that actually help you, but if you eat a little bit of raw and a lot of it cooked, I think you'll kind of get a good balance. And some people can eat a lot of raw oxalates and have no problem at all. So I hope that helps.
That's amazing. Thank you.
So if anybody else has any other questions, just go ahead and unmute your mic. I'm checking the chat. If you're shy, you want to go to the chat. Hey, that looks great. Okay, guys, so I will see you next week on Tuesdays. I always talk about how we balance our diet to reverse obesity. That's all I do on Tuesday. Going through the same information 100 different ways, because a lot of people say, yeah, you know, the way you said it last week was different than you said it this week, because I believe that repeating it in different directions reaches people in different ways. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to try to either pick a topic, or you can email me an area you would like for me to talk about. And actually, this topic tonight came because one of my patients had an issue with a doctor that gave her, I think, 2,500 milligrams of calcium to supplement because of osteopenia. And I noticed she's on the podcast tonight, which is awesome. And so instead of taking an hour and really going into it with her, I decided this would be a great podcast. So a lot of times in treating patients, sometimes I'll go, this is maybe something everybody should know. So anyways, thank you guys. Anybody else have any other questions? If not, I will see you guys next week.